All right, it's time for Know Your Enemy. We've got a friend of the show, RJ Ochoa of Blogging with the Boys, has been on the Blue Rush preview show before, and he joins us now because we gotta know what's going down in Dallas. RJ's on with us now. RJ, what's going on, my man? How's the vibes down there in the D?
Great to be with you all. Everything's terrible. Our pets' heads are falling off. The greatness of football season returning has dissipated. But it's a short week. It's an unusually short week for the Cowboys this early in the season, but it's great to be with you all.
Paul, sounds familiar, but it's good to hear it from somebody else for the first time. Paul, go ahead and kick us off, man.
Yeah, well, first of all, RJ, I apologize for the name of the segment, Know Your Enemy. I mean, we try not to be so... we're all friends here in a certain sense, right? So I guess it's more like know your counterparts on the team that's coming in, okay? So no enemy here. Look, as a beat writer with the Giants the last many years, when things go bad, it's, who's on the hot seat, who's on the hot seat. So let me ask you right away. We know about McCarthy. He's got a great record, but they don't do anything in the playoffs. So at 1-2, is the seat not hot? Is it lukewarm? Is it getting there? And how hot might it be if they actually lose this game Thursday night?
Yeah, I think certainly McCarthy is public enemy number one, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that, there are fewer grains of sand left in his hourglass, especially after the Dak extension that came down a few weeks ago. And I think you both understand that the Cowboys have had a lot of success against the Giants, not just in the McCarthy era, but the Dak Prescott era. And so to lose this game, I feel like would be a real, oh my gosh, you actually lost to the Giants. That never happens to the Cowboys. And again, I say that respectfully. And so would the Cowboys make a change after a Thursday night game? That's a common time, obviously, for some NFL teams, but it does feel rather early. McCarthy's on a one-year deal, so is his staff for the most part. And so this is kind of shaping up. It feels very similar, not quite to Jason Garrett's final season with the Cowboys, but to Wade Phillips' last season in 2010. And incidentally, his final game was a loss to Mike McCarthy's Green Bay Packers. So it is about as bad as it could get. And I do think that a loss to the Giants specifically, wouldn't be the straw that breaks the camel's back, but would at the very least, maybe you get the paperwork started in some different respects.
Well, when we talk about the last two meetings last season between the two teams, the Cowboys outscored the Giants 89-17. The Giants have kind of been a little brother to not only Dak Prescott, but to the Cowboys organization. So things will heat up. Things will really be heating up down there in Dallas, and that's not the barbecue. But, RJ, I want to ask you, man, because Giants fans, we saw through Hard Knocks how the offseason and free agency kind of played out. We watched ESPN, the NFL Network, to see how you guys' offseason kind of played out. Are you surprised right now of the state of the team and the franchise after the offseason, not signing guys in the free agency, and then the whole media circus when it came to getting CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott signed?
I like to think that I'm good at my job, but it didn't take any, advanced level of analysis to get to this point, to assume that this would be the case. Not participating in free agency in any serious respect, drafting completely and totally for need, ignoring the running back position, thinking that bringing Zeke Elliott back, as nostalgic as that was, would work out. And none of those things have ultimately worked out to any significant degree. Granted, we're only 3 weeks into the season, delaying the extensions for CeeDee Lamb, for Dak Prescott, causing CeeDee Lamb to miss all of training camp. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that the Cowboys took the most toxic possible option at every turn of the offseason, and they exacerbated the issue by, the all-in and things like that. And it really has perpetuated. It really has created this cloud, this air of negativity that began, obviously, when they got their doors blown off of them against the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs. From that moment through this one, the Cowboys remain chasing the ghosts of the past. It doesn't help, obviously, that they live in this almost 30-year-old shadow. It is as heavy of a time as it has ever been, at least in my overall life, not just the time I've been doing this professionally, for the Cowboys in terms of what they're trying to do.
There are certain things in sports, right, where if you can't do it, you look helpless, right? Like a baseball team without relief pitching. There's a sense of inevitability. A hockey team without a goalie. I cannot believe the Cowboys' run defense is this bad. Now, I get it. their personnel is not set up. And, you will speak, I'm sure, more to that than I'm saying now. It's not set up to be a stout run defense. I get it. It's an attacking, we want to sack the quarterback run defense. I get it. But, 557 rushing yards. That's the most through 3 games for the Cowboys since 1963. I mean, that's a long time ago, right? The Cowboys have not been around, quite as long as the Giants, who are celebrating their 100th year. So is it that they just don't have the players to do it? I heard guys talking about hero ball and playing Superman and Little League and all this stuff. I would think if there is a time that they're going to rally and say at all costs we're going to stop the run, it'll be this week. But RJ, can they do it?
The Cowboys spent a first-round draft pick on a defensive tackle last year in Mozzie Smith. It was the first time since they did so with Russell Maryland in 1991. For the most part, the Cowboys, throughout the Jerry Jones era of ownership and managerial ownership, have been a team that has just kind of used cast-offs along the interior, and they have been able to survive. Obviously, they haven't won the Super Bowl, but they have been able to get things done, and Mozzie Smith, they're kind of forced to depend on. On top of that, they obviously made the trade with the Giants for Jordan Phillips, in the middle of training camp. That hasn't worked out. He's on injured reserve. That was a bit of a colorful story in terms of how that all unfolded last week. Linval Joseph is a name. Osa Digizu was the best defensive tackle on the team. They just don't have the horses. And beyond that, there is this kind of, I don't want to say spirit of quit or spirit of brokenness, but this spirit of, Lucy's going to pull this ball loose once again. Somebody's going to rip off a huge run. It doesn't help that they've gone up against Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry in back-to-back weeks, but this seems to be a systemic issue that dates back to last year and really throughout the entire Dan Quinn era. You mentioned obviously playing hero ball. The Cowboys defense is kind of built like a Formula One race car. It's super fast and it's designed to get after the quarterback. And obviously you all have seen that with their intense and stout pass rush, but it isn't stable along the interior. You need an 18-wheeler there, not, the fastest car known to mankind. And that has been something that has been kind of a staple of Dallas Cowboys defenses, regardless of who the coordinator has been.
When we talk about the Cowboys' rush defense, they've recorded 32 missed tackles this season. That results in the third most yards lost to missed tackles with 241. DeMarcus Lawrence is tied for the most missed tackles in 2024 with 9. So when we talk about Micah Parsons talking about guys playing Superman and hero ball, is he talking to another player or is he talking to his defensive coordinator?
The Cowboys have Mike Zimmer back at defensive coordinator. Was a move that at least I personally wasn't moved by. The only other candidates who they reportedly considered in a serious sense were Ron Rivera and Rex Ryan, to kind of contextualize how we got here. Micah Parsons has spoken up for Mike Zimmer many times, dating back to the beginning of training camp. But if Zimmer has one thing, if he is kind of known for anything, it's his tenacity and some would argue his personality and how it rubs people the wrong way. But in the sense of instilling discipline, and the stats you read off, the Cowboys had 158 yards against them from Baltimore last week that were directly a result of missed tackles. Entering Sunday Night Football, that was the most that any team had allowed in this particular capacity in a single game this season. So it is a discipline issue. It is something that is plaguing the entire team. And I think the hero ball is, Dak Prescott threw an interception last week against the New Orleans Saints when the Cowboys were down 22. And it just felt like he was trying to score 22 points on that singular throw. And it feels like the Cowboys defense is trying to do that at every single waking turn. They're trying to have this moment, this catalytic moment that can turn all this around and end this funk and get them out of this mud and this quicksand that they have found themselves in. And you mentioned baseball, Paul. You don't have to hit a home run every time. Right now, the Cowboys are in a position where they just need dudes on base. I mean, not because they have to get their cleanup hitter or whoever up to bat, but because they need base runners. They need runners in scoring position because right now they're just getting 3 up, 3 down each and every single inning.
Look, I mean, you mentioned Dak, throwing an interception. Dak Prescott just always beats the Giants. I know his first 2 starts of his career in 2016, he lost to the Giants, right? I mean, I think weren't they 13-3 that year? So he went 13-1 against.
Those are 2 of the losses, yeah.
Yeah, 13-1 against everybody else and 0-2 against the Giants. Crazy. That was, you just look back. It's a long time ago, but it's not ancient history. That was the year where we all thought, wow, Ben McAdoo, first-year head coach. The Giants got something here. And he didn't even make it out of the second year. I mean, things go fast in the NFL, right? But, Dak is there. He's paid. He's not going anywhere. There's no power struggle, right? I mean, if McCarthy's there, they're not going to be there. Dak is still going to be there. So, I find it hard to believe that Dak is not going to come in and have a big game. Now, CeeDee Lamb, I know all that drama that went on this summer. He just looks a little rusty, doesn't he? And is that because he wasn't there? Is that because his head wasn't in the right spot? And clearly, they don't have a lot of horses, right? As you mentioned, they have CeeDee Lamb, they have Dak, they have a nice tight end. Is there that much else that really will frighten other teams?
To be honest, no. I mean, from a skill position standpoint, it's CeeDee Lamb and some dudes, right? Like you mentioned, Jake Ferguson's kind of a dude with a capital D. Brandon Cooks is nice. Jalen Tolbert's nice, but there's nothing in the run game that terrifies anybody. So it does kind of come down to the two dudes who were recently paid in Dak and CeeDee. Now, last week was kind of everyone's worst fears being totally and truly realized with regards to Lamb specifically. He has, I wouldn't call it a tendency, but last year the Cowboys got blown out by the 49ers on Sunday Night Football, and Lamb was seeing, what some people would describe as pouting. We saw that behavior in the Green Bay Packers playoff loss last year. I'm not a body language expert, but it did not look great this past Sunday against Baltimore. It looked like CeeDee was dejected. It looked like there were some issues of that particular cut between this team, which is representative of the fact that things do seem to feel a little bit toxic. So if you're talking about he's Batman, this isn't the Avengers, and Batman is upset and morose to whatever degree that he may or may not be, it just creates more dysfunction for everybody to try and work through. The Cowboys mounted a cool, cute little comeback of sorts last week against Baltimore, but that comeback involved Hunter Lipke and Jalen Tolbert and Kevontae Turpin. And you tell me if those dudes scare you, because it's really going to come down to that. Now, can Dak Prescott will another Cowboys victory against the Giants specifically? I'd have a hard time not believing that the case based on all of history, as you mentioned. But it is as dire of a set of circumstances that it has been in the Dak Prescott era for this team. It's reminiscent of 2018 when they had just released Des Bryant. Jason Witten had initially retired to go do Monday Night Football, and they had what they call the wide receiver by committee that was so bad that they had to trade for Amari Cooper midseason.
Talking about that receiver by committee and CeeDee Lamb being frustrated against the Ravens per Next Gen Stats, none of the Cowboys receivers met the league average of 2.96 yards of separation. What are they doing right? Because obviously, it's the Giants. It could be a good get right game, RJ. What are the Cowboys doing right to where you feel as though they can right their wrong or right the ship Thursday prime time against the New York Giants on Thursday Night Football?
Well, against Cleveland, they were able to obviously have a lot of success because Deshaun Watson, as you all well know, certainly recently, is a quarterback who likes to hold on to the ball a lot, a quarterback who kind of invites pressure. We've seen that from Daniel Jones against the Cowboys in the past, and maybe his game has evolved. Certainly, I'm anxious to find out, but they're capitalizing on people around them who are willing to make mistakes. That just wasn't the case against New Orleans or Baltimore, and I think it is difficult to assess what they're doing right because they got down so big against both the Saints and the Ravens. Consider that New Orleans scored touchdowns on their first 6 possessions against Dallas. So the hole was dug, and that, as you guys understand, changes the fabric and the DNA of what you're trying to do in a given NFL game. And they got down early 14-3 against Baltimore, and all of a sudden you're playing catch up there. Now, if you want to stretch and if you want to give them some sort of kudos or attaboys, they are kind of fighting, not quitting, like exemplified by the fact that they did rally a little bit late against Baltimore. I think as the Cowboys began to attack the middle of the field against the Ravens, that was when they finally started to have success in the fourth quarter. But it is difficult, and I know I don't mean to sound like Eeyore and the sky is falling and everything like that, but the list of things that they're doing right is far and few in between.
I mean, it's unbelievable when you look at the stats. And Derek Carr threw 16 passes against the Cowboys, and Lamar Jackson threw 15. I mean, what is this? The old, the old Big Ten. That's not NFL football, right? And so it shows that these games were lopsided early, as we know. And, I just don't see that being the case. The Giants are not that kind of an offense that's going to jump on you right away. And again. I mean, the Giants looked excellent in the first half in Cleveland, scoring 3 touchdowns and then didn't score a point in the second half. So sustained excellence with this offense is going to be difficult. For years, it was the Giants could not deal with the Cowboys' offensive line. It was a staple, right? It was, no matter who they had, the offensive line. Is the offensive line, would you say now, it's not what it was, but is it still a plus for the Cowboys, or is it just kind of like it's an offensive line, it's nothing special anymore?
You know, I think the national opinion on the Cowboys offensive line for a long time has been this is one of the best in the NFL because so many people regarded it that way for so long, to your point. It dipped for a while, and it's, I think, on its way back. It's a bit of a sine curve right now, but they're still on their way up. They have a rookie at left tackle, their first-round draft pick out of Oklahoma, and Tyler Guyton. They have a rookie at center out of Kansas State, their third-round pick, who they got in the trade down with Detroit for the Guyton pick, in Cooper Beebe. So they're very green. It's probably through 3 games at least, and admittedly a very, very small sample size. The worst season we've ever seen from Zach Martin, which is really saying something. Again, just contextually, it's just he's much closer to the end of his career than the beginning. Last week was not the best game for Tyler Smith at left guard, obviously, their third-year player who they took in the first round in 2022. And at right tackle, Terrence Steele is not necessarily a super reliable option. So it's a work in progress, and it's clearly moving towards a new future where they want to be what they were with Tyron Smith and Travis Frederick and a younger version of Zach Martin, but it's gettable. It's absolutely gettable. We saw both New Orleans and Baltimore have a lot of success against the Cowboys in that sense. A lot of pressures and a lot of blitzes against Dak Prescott, and he's, you know, very, very famously very good against the blitz, but it is a different thing when you're working with this kind of set of lemons to make lemonade from.
Real quick to close this out, RJ, give us your final thoughts heading into Thursday.
Look, we're down bad. The Cowboys are down bad, but and again, I say this with all due respect, they own the Giants, and Dak Prescott specifically owns the Giants. If there's one thing that I will trust and I will bet on relative to this team, it is him. So I will trust that he will drag this lifeless team to a win and stop the bleeding for a little bit, for 10 days at least. The Cowboys are on Sunday Night Football next week, but I bet it takes a last-second heroic kind of fourth-quarter drive, in a way it hasn't against the Giants specifically, for the Cowboys to put this one away.
Tell the people they can find you, RJ.
All my written work can be found at bloggingtheboys.com. I'm on social media at RJ Ochoa, everywhere that you can find any kind of social content, except for TikTok. Some jerk had that, so I had to go with RJ.Ochoa over there.